Hello, guys. Is everyone here? Not really. Can you guys send out a quick reminder to the classmates that have the Wednesday class that we want to have everybody coming to today's class?
Sir, afternoon, sir.
Hopefully there's no clash.
Sir, remember the first week when we were discussing the people that have the tutorial scheduled on Monday have a class on Wednesday at 2, and the people that have the tutorial on Wednesday have something scheduled for Monday at 2. So not everybody can come in.
I see. Yes, I do remember. What time does that finish? You know anybody in that group? What time does that 2 o'clock class finish?
I'll ask, sir.
All right, cool.
It's 2 to 5 because there's a tutorial and a lecture.
Oh wow! It's the whole time. The whole until 5, you say?
Yes, sir.
I see. I don't know. Can we survive with one lecturer and one lecture class? That is tricky. All right, let's see. I mean, what we're doing today, they could actually watch the video and do it, but it's not exactly balanced. But that's the best I can do based on my schedule. There's a lot of overlaps. All right, let's see. Let's take a glimpse back on this calendar. Okay. Right, so that they have it from 10. Yeah, that's pretty much out for me. Okay. Nevertheless, it can definitely work. The only kind of trick to it is that the second group will have to work from the recording. That's the only trick. The reason I want to do it like this is because we are we're coming up on when we're going to start doing the presentations. Remember those presentation topics, guys? So those presentations are supposed to happen in the lecture class. So we want to try and knock out as much of the practical as possible, because when we get to those presentations, basically every week we're gonna have like about, I'm hoping to fit 3 presentations per practical. Maybe 2. I don't know if we can manage 3, but I'm hoping that these presentations won't be longer than 20 minutes. It's supposed to be 20 minutes, right? So I believe we can knock out 3 per week. the thing is, I only have you guys for lecture technically, so I'm kind of juggling to fit in the practical as well. So what we'll do is that we'll just go through what we're going to go through today, because it's relatively short. It's not, it's primarily because of the questions, just in case some of us have any questions and things that come up on the fly from having class. We might do something and you learn something new because you're able to ask the lecturer something, or something like that. So that's, I guess, one of the benefits. Other than that, in today's modern online classes, recordings and tutorials are always there. So that is what we'll do, guys. All right. We will just continue as usual, and then the second group watches the video, so we can keep on track. All right. In terms of the class activity, what I'll do is that the deadline for the class activity, I will make it be the second group. I will make it be on Wednesday. So if we do have a class activity that is in the practical session, where you need to hand in the work at the end of class, you can just hand it in. The other group can just hand it in on Wednesday. Fair enough, guys? How does that sound?
Yes, sir. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Okay. So, as I said, I'm always promising a short class, and it don't normally end up short, don't it? So I won't give out that promise again, right? But we only have one mission today. We are looking at building a terrain for our model, right? And I've been looking at some of the handings, and I've been marking, and I don't know, I'm seeing hold on, this thing is too high, right? I am seeing some site contours that have no contours, that have no heights, no numbering. So I don't know how you're going to model your contour today if you don't know how high it is. I mean, you guys can just make it up on the fly, but that is one of the criteria for the sketch, right? Your contour lines need to actually have numbers on them. There are some sketch that I see where the contours are sloping uphill to the water, right? That sounds a little bit like, I don't know, like an Inception movie or something. I don't think that's possible. But I'm seeing terrains that's sloping up to the water based on the numbering, right? So you guys need to watch the numbering. We're going to look on two ways to build a terrain. Anybody here has access to 3D Studio Max? Anybody here interested to use it, or anybody? Nope.
No, sir.
Or anybody knows how to use it? Okay.
No,
Sounds
sir.
like
if I can run it.
okay. All right, cool. All right, well, I'm gonna see whatever tips I can fit in as it relates to that, because there's a lot of flexibility with editing your terrain in a more flexible program. But the primary program we're going to use will be Revit. This activity is open though. You can do it using another program. I don't want to open that up because whatever program you use, it has to come back into Revit. So I mean, you know, if you use ArchiCAD, Let's see. I guess you could export as 3ds and then import that in right now. Right. So it's going to either be Revit or AutoCAD or 3D Max. You know, most people, we used to use AutoCAD in the past. In the past, it used to be between Revit and AutoCAD. Sorry, in the past, it used to be between AutoCAD and 3D Max. Then we went into Revit. So all our workflow is going to be through Revit. But AutoCAD will integrate just nicely and 3D Max will integrate just nicely into Revit. So whichever program you want to use, it is totally up to you. All right. But our tutorial today will be with Revit. All right. Let's see. Let's take a quick look on our timeline to keep track of where we are. Right, guys, it's going to get a little bumpy as we go further in the semester. What's happening in studio now? You guys are doing which project now?
So we're doing the urban housing.
All right. Don't you get another project before urban housing, or the whole semester is just urban housing?
Not sure. So we got a starter project, but I don't consider that a big assignment really.
Because urban housing alone, so.
Right, pretty much. Yeah, you probably have like a warm-up project or something, but okay. All right, cool. So basically you'll be working on urban housing the whole time. All right, that sounds cool. All right. Well, what we're doing in 3D modeling is going to tie into your urban housing. There is a studio-based project where you're going to produce something. You're going to use something from your design studio project and render it in computing, and we're marketing computing, and you get to use it for design studio. So that saves you guys a lot of time. So that is coming up a little later. But our first mission is that we're going to get rid of the major project, and I wonder, most of us are perhaps using Revit to do our housing project. Am I right? Is there anybody using any other program apart from Revit?
So I planned on using SketchUp and maybe ArchiCAD.
Okay, SketchUp and ArchiCAD, that's cool. Well, I mean, you know, Studio is open, so you can use whatever you need. Our main mission in 3D modeling is that we need you guys to be as flexible as possible. You can build whatever you want to build, right? And not only rely on the tools. So, you know, if you only have a tool that can build a square, you're not only limited to a square, because you know the fundamentals of modeling. You can extrude and subtract and do all of these things to get any shape that you want. So that's kind of our objective in 3D modeling. The idea is if you build this major project, you are supposed to be very flexible with Revit. You know, sometimes you want to show an item and maybe it's not in the family. You know, you can build it, right? And that's the stage that we want you guys to be at, right? Also with terrain and site as well, which is why we're going to be modeling a site today. All right, so for those of you going to use Revit, just jump into Revit. It is a class activity, so we'll be collecting it at the end of class, aka at the end of the day. Usually give it to the end of the day to hand it in. So the idea is that we want to be following along. It's pretty short. It's probably going to be about less than an hour. All right. So, all right. I was bringing up the website so we could take a look on the time lines that we have thus far, right? All right, so let's head over to the website here. And if we go to student computing, and let's go to intro to 3D modeling. The 3DM 2023. Okay, so right, so we're dealing with this today. Okay, let's look at the major project. There we go. All right, so well, most people has done the sketch. A few have done the schematic drawings. Remember, guys, the policy is that it is a percentage per day for late work. All right, so please try and finish the work on time and hand it in. The ones that are also class work, you get your regular grade plus the grade goes towards your class participation as well. So this is what we're going to be looking at today. We're going to be looking at checkpoint 2, and let's take a look at our timeline here. According to our timeline, checkpoint 2.
Sorry, can I ask a question? Being that it's a percentage per day, because I haven't submitted. How much would have already been gone?
Well, because we aren't, evil human beings, the percentage per day is out of 100, not out of what it is worth. Because then that would that would just be, I guess, not so nice, so to speak. So, for example, checkpoint 2 is worth 10%. Not sure why this 5. It is worth 10%. Let me check the handout. Yeah, it is worth 10%. So the percentage a day is not 1% of the 10%. It is 1% out of 100. All right. But still, I mean, if you hand in your work like 4 days, 4 weeks later, that's like 40%, which is like almost half the way. I'm just saying, even though it is not much, I think.
Yes, it's still an incentive to
Right, it's still an incentive, and I guess you guys would have known that there are lecturers out there that just don't collect work once it's past the deadline.
I haven't really read through it, but I was wanted to ask. It has to be done in Revit, right? Or
yeah, this project has to be done in Revit. There are elements that doesn't have to be done in Revit. For example, the site. Traditionally they have some persons that would rather build a site in 3ds Max or AutoCAD or whatever. So the terrain itself, as long as you can get it into Revit, you can build it. And of course, the schematic drawing doesn't have to be done in Revit. Some persons usually maybe use AutoCAD because that's like a 2D drafting program. For checkpoint 3, definitely this has to be done in Revit, which is the main model. And for checkpoint 4, the photorealistic is usually done in Lumion or Twinmotion. You can also do it in Revit. Yeah, is that a question?
No, I didn't ask.
Oh, okay. Right. The exploded view, that has to be done in Revit, and the section and orthographic view, all that is in Revit. I mean, you just wouldn't go anywhere else to do it because it's just much easier to do that in the program. The animation is usually done in Twinmotion or Lumion, but you can do it in Revit if you want. It's just a simple 360 animation, so whichever program. Right, so that is what the program trajectory looks like, right? So for checkpoint 2, you do have until next week Sunday, right? Which is just, I know you might be saying, oh, that's not a lot of time. Well, some of you saying, oh yeah, I have time, man. I don't have to start. I hope there are nobody that's saying that. We're going to be doing part of the work in checkpoint 2 now in class, which is going to be the terrain, right? The other aspects of checkpoint 2, you can also get that from the videos that we've provided here. So for example, building your floorboards. I mean, some of these activities we may do in class, like for example, building the terrain in Revit. So that tutorial is not here, so we're going to do that in class, right? And the other ones are here, so we don't have to necessarily do them in class. So for example, creating the floorboards, you just click on that and then you're able to watch that tutorial. All right. And that.
Oh, sorry to cut you off. But question, let's say I did my terrain in SketchUp. When I transfer it to Revit, will I be able to get contour lines from said
Well,
terrain?
you don't need drawings for this delivery. So you don't have to worry about showing the contour lines in Revit.
Okay.
All we're concerned about at the end of the day is going to be these views. So we're not doing drawings, all right? In terms of having to show the contour lines.
Okay,
right?
sir, understood.
All right. But you do have to submit your working file and an image. You can just do a screen clip in whatever program you're going to use. All right?
Okay, sir, no problem.
All right, cool. But usually the recommendation is, to use Revit. And if you want to get some, I'm going to be showing you some cool things that you can do with Studio Max. That doesn't require you to know the program inside and out. But you can get a little bit more artistic freedom by taking your model into Studio Max and back, or just building the terrain in Studio Max and then carrying it into Revit, whichever one that you choose to do, at least when you're rendering. If you're doing drawings, then I wouldn't recommend you take the drawing into Studio Max. Just keep it in Revit and do everything in Revit if you are doing construction drawings. All right, so that is our mission. All right, I was looking on the timeline. So we have until Sunday coming to hand in checkpoint 2. I'm almost finished marking checkpoint 1. And usually how I mark, I just mark and then I move on to the next thing to mark. And then it's only at the end of the semester that I will go back to something that I perhaps didn't mark. So yeah. But as I say, guys, try and get it in as much as possible. Remember that your lecturers also has tons of things to do. So if we allocate time to mark something and there's nothing to mark, then we have to mark it in a time that was not allocated, and then that leads to other challenges. All right, so we want to be mindful of everybody else's time. All right. Okay, alrighty. So without further ado, I'm going to give you a couple minutes so you guys can just fire up Revit. please be mindful that you want to keep your version of Revit consistent. So if if you've been working in one Revit, try and work in the same program, the same year. Right. Just so that we don't have any, because I guess you perhaps know by now with Revit you can move up, but not down. Once you go up, there's no coming back, right? It is a one-way street. All right. The project. Okay, so let's take a look on this. Now remember, one of the advantages for doing this in class as a class activity is to be able to ask questions, right? As we're here working. So, does everybody have their Revit ready and their sketch ready? Or do you need a couple seconds more?
I have mine open.
All right. Can I get another confirmation from somebody else?
Yes, sir.
Are we ready? Okay. All right, let's roll. Now, in creating the 3D terrain, most of you might have a sketch that looks like this that may have all the question. Oh no? Okay.
No, sir. I want to
Plans
answer that.
and also the terrain on the same drawing. Now the first thing we need to do is to separate these. So the easiest way to do that is to open the file in the Windows photo view. That's the default Windows photo view. Head over to edit image and then head to crop, and then we are just going to crop it, showing only the terrain, and we're going to click save a copy. Now as soon as you save a copy, it should look like this. And the important things that you need to have is the terrain lines, naturally. You need to also have an indication of where the water will be. And also important is going to be the height of each of the terrain lines. Now some persons may have foliage represented, that will be no problem, and some persons might have a boundary line that is also represented. Of course, you will also need to highlight where your building will sit. Now if you have all of these elements, you will be able to start to create your terrain. So let's go ahead and do that now. Now some persons may already have created their foundation base already, and the foundation base should look something like this. the designs may vary. Now, though we're going to create our terrain, we are not going to use the Revit file that contains the foundation. Instead, we are going to start a brand new Revit file. So on the left here, you can see where I will be opening a brand new Revit file, and I'll be choosing the architectural imperial template. Or I could also use the architectural metric template if you so wish. So let's use the metric template. So I'm going to create a new project. Now when everything loads up, it should look like a blank file like this. Now the concept is that we are going to build our terrain in this file, and that would be, for example, our building there. And then at a later time, we are going to insert the Revit file with the building model inside of the terrain Revit file, and that is how we will merge the two together. What this allows us to do is to freely position our building on our terrain easily whenever we finish building our terrain. So that is the concept of how we will tackle this project. Hence, so do you guys understand that concept? So we're going to end
Yes,
up with
sir.
two Revit files. Yeah. All right, cool. We do not need to worry about our foundation model just yet. Instead, we're going to concentrate on building our terrain here. So with that said, we only need to have the terrain Revit file ready. Now, it's a good practice that the first thing you do when using Revit to build anything is to save your file. So in this case, I'm going to save my empty file first before I get going. Now, once our file is saved, the idea is that we want to take our sketch and we want to drop that sketch onto the workspace in Revit. Now, in order to do that, we are going to need to insert, by going to the Insert tab, that drawing into our project. So we go to Insert. Then we might ask the question, what are we inserting? Well, what we want to do is to import an image onto this drawing. So we choose Import. And then we're going to browse to the location of that image. In my case, I have it on my desktop. And it's going to ask me to place the image, and I'm going to place it right there. All right. Now, once the image is in your workspace, the first thing we need to do, depending on your sketch, you may need to align this image. So we might want to rotate the image a little bit to make the file a little easy to work with. And the idea is that we want to make it parallel to our building. So when we insert our building, it will be according to the axis in Revit. That will just make our file easier to work with. The next thing we need to do is to scale this drawing, because as we know, our building should have a particular width and a particular height. So because we know that the width and the height is going to be 6.5 meters and 6.5 meters, we can use that to scale this drawing appropriately. So let's go ahead and do that now. Now, first thing we're going to do is to rotate this model. And to do that, we are going to use the rotate tool, which is located here. Ensure that you have the model selected, the drawing selected in Revit. And we're going to hit the rotate tool here. Now what we want to do is we want to move this center point to a location like at the corner of here that we can use to gauge the angle of rotation. Alright, so we do that by clicking and dragging. So we're going to click the center point and drag it, and then we're going to kind of zoom in and we're going to kind of try to estimate. Alright. Mic check. Hello, are you guys hearing me? I think
In this connect.
Check, check.
yeah, you hearing me?
Yes, sir. Here now.
Yes, sir.
All right. I think there's a break in transmission. All right, let's continue. All right. Click the center point and drag it, and then selected, the drawing selected in Revit, and we're going to hit the rotate tool here. Now what we want to do is we want to move this center point to a location like at the corner of here that we can use to gauge the angle of rotation. Alright, so we do that by clicking and dragging. So we're going to click the center point and drag it, and then we're going to kind of zoom in and we're going to kind of try to estimate the straight part of this line here. Click once, and then we're going to rotate it until it snaps horizontal. Click again, and that's all we have to do. So we now have the building fully rotated. Now the next thing we need to do is to scale.
Quick question, sir.
Yeah.
What if you already like draw it that way, sir? Draw the
Then
side.
you're good to go.
Okay, okay.
Scale the building, and the easiest way to do that is we're going to use some reference lines, and we're going to have a line here, and we're going to have a line here, and we know that between these lines needs to measure 6.5 meters. So with that said, let's set up our reference lines. Now in order to do this, we want to establish some reference lines that we will use to scale the drawing, and to do that we're going to head over to architecture, and we're actually going to use what's called a reference plane. Now think of a reference plane like a construction line that you might use when you're creating a drawing, and you use these lines to align your drawing before committing actual movements. Now in our case, we're going to use those reference plane to help us to align the drawing rather than having to draw actual line work. So to do that, we're going to click reference plane, and we're just going to kind of estimate where the edge is here. I'm going to make sure that that wall is straight by holding shift. That line is straight, and then we're going to draw another line pretty much at the other end of this wall here. Now already we know that this distance needs to be 6,500 millimeters. If I click on it, notice that Revit will give us a temporary dimension there, and the great thing about Revit is that we can just click that temporary dimension and type in our own dimension here. So I'll type in 6,005. All right. So so this is just a quick reminder about temporary dimensions, right? Automatically, once you click on an object in Revit, it will show you the distance from the nearest object, and you can just click on that measurement and just edit it. All right. Okay, how are we all doing? Are we going along, or we need a little time to catch up so everybody on the same page?
Sir, I'm at where the reference line and part of it is, but how did you get the measurement? Do you just create a dimension line?
No, temporary dimension. So once you click on a line, the temporary dimension will just pop up to the closest thing that it can measure from.
Oh, so I have to draw two then.
So you don't have to draw the dimension line. You just click on the line, and when the temporary dimension come up, you can literally just edit it right there.
Okay.
All right, so let's look on that again. It is that we can 6,500 millimeters. If I click on it, notice that Revit will give us a temporary dimension there. And the great thing about Revit is that we can just click that temporary dimension and type in our own dimension here. So I'll type in 6,500. All right, now once that is in, we can see that that should be the size of this box, and in turn that will help us to scale this drawing. Now to scale the drawing, first thing we need to do is we need to select that actual drawing. So let's click it now. Once we click the drawing, notice that at the top Revit gives us the modify options for raster images, and what we want to do is head to the scale icon, which is right here. So we're going to click the scale icon here, and what we're going to do is select a starting point, then select the end point of what you wish to scale, and then move the mouse towards what you wish to scale it to, and click once, and that's it. So now this is basically scaled. Now we can get rid of these reference lines as we don't need. So we're going to click the scale icon here. So let's swatch that one more time. What we're going to do is select a starting point, then select the end point of what you wish to scale, and then move the mouse towards what you wish to scale it to, and click once, and that's it. So now this is basically scaled. Now we can get rid of these reference lines as we don't need them anymore. Now that that's done, we have the building scaled, and the next order of business would be to start drawing these contour lines. Now, before we start to draw our terrain, there's a couple of things we need to do. The first thing to notice is that we are currently drawing on level 1, right? And this is the default level that we got when we first opened Revit. Now, ideally, if we're going to draw a site, we want to be in the site view, because that will allow us to view areas of your model that is both above, that is high up, and below the cutting plane, right? So in order to do that, we need to move this drawing over to the site view, because if we head over to the site view right now, we realize that the drawing is blank because our reference drawing is on level 1, right? So what we're going to do is we are going to select the drawing here, and we're going to head over to modify, and then we head to copy. Then we go over to site, and we click the little arrow below the paste button, and then we're going to choose paste to same place, and that's going to paste it right in the same location. Now once that is done, now we're actually going to start to trace our terrain lines. Now before we start tracing, there is something important that we need to notice. In this particular drawing, you realize that the boundary lines are pretty close to building here, and what we want to do is we want to give ourselves more space around the building, so that when we start to generate our 3D views, it doesn't look like this building is kind of just floating in the middle of space, right? So what we're going to recommend is that for those of you who have a relatively small site, that we can kind of estimate a nice distance that is going to be pretty decent, perhaps a distance like that, so that our site can be, we can give ourselves some space. So you can use your own judgment, but typically we're going to use the same contour line slope. However, we're going to not have our site begin right at the boundary line. Now to do this, it would be a good idea to just do a quick kind of guide sketch on where do we want the edges of our site to be, right? And what we can do is, to do that sketch, we can just go over to architecture, and we can use the model line feature, which is located right there. Now when we go to model line, we'll go into sketch mode, and we're going to want to click the circle, and then probably just place it in the middle of wherever your building is. And this is just to give us an idea of how big we want the site to be. So in this case, I'm probably going to make it about this big. Alright, remember this is an estimate, so you don't need to necessarily have this exact measurement that I do. Now what we're going to do now is we're going to use these contour lines just the same, except we're simply going to extend these lines to the edge of where we have drawn, right here. And that is how we'll get the contours in our 3D terrain to be much larger, but it will still follow the design that we intended in our sketch. Alright, so now to get started with the contours, we are going to go over to our massing and site category, and then we want to go to the topo surface button. Alright, now once we click the topo surface, we're going to go in a kind of a special sketch mode to draw our topography, right? And when we finish sketching our topography, we need to confirm our topography by clicking the green tick right here. So let's get started on our topography. Now there are two important things we need to make sure. We need to ensure that we are on the place point, which we should be by default, and we need to give a close eye on the elevation height. this elevation height should work in tandem with the elevation markers, or the contour height rather, that you have on your sketch. So we're going to change the elevation height for each one of these contour lines. Alright, good. So let's get started. Now if I zoom in here, you'll see that the first contour line I have is 3,000 meters above sea level. 3,000 millimeters above sea level. So I'm going to put 3,000 here. And instead of starting to I could start to place my points here, and this is where things get interesting. A good rule of thumb is when you're placing your points, let's say that I place my points on these markers here. Notice the distance between the markers. Now, a good rule of thumb you can use is this distance between each marker should averagely be about the distance between each contour lines. Now I know some contour lines are bigger and some are much smaller, but you can definitely just eyeball this. But for example, you wouldn't place points that are this far, right? You wouldn't place points that are that far, because that distance is way larger than any distance between your contour lines, right? So that is just a quick rule of thumb that you can use when you're placing contour lines. So let's start to place the contour lines now. So I want to make sure that my elevation is at 3,000, and then I'm going to start to place some points along here. Now another thing that you want to ensure while you're placing points is, let's go in wireframe mode by clicking right here, and let's go to wireframe mode. And the reason for that is, once we start to create our contours, we're going to start to cover our drawing, but we're going to need to see our drawing in order to create these contours, right? So we're going to click and place points along this edge here. So notice I'm just making it the same distance as, the average distance between each point. Now what I want to do now is I want to extend beyond this point, and I'm just going to kind of estimate what this contour line is doing, and I want to end there. Then I also want to extend this point right here. Right? Now, since this is the top or the last contour mark that I have here, I'm going to assume that this entire area on the top of my hill is going to be 3 meters above sea level. So what that means is that I would now continue to place markers roughly about where my circle is, right? So what this has done, it has made this top section here, where you can see the dots, 3,000 millimeters above sea level. Now our next contour mark below, we can see that it is 2,500. So we're going to change this to 2,500 percent up, and then we're going to do the same. So it's a typical rhythm, and don't worry about making these exact. My rule of thumb is that this is a contour, and contours represent the kind of organic nature in life, so it's not really supposed to be very straight lines, right? And I'm going to end it there, and I'm also going to extend this point. I'm going to end that there, and then I'm going to continue to do the same. I'm going to change this now to 2,000, and I'm just going to start from over here and kind of just catch this mark right here. and you can pan and zoom while you're in the contour tool. Alright, great. So now it's 1500, and I'm going to do the same thing here, and I'm going to make sure that I just catch the 1.5 meters right there, and I will just continue to go there. Then we want to go 1000, and let's start from about here. Now if you mess up, you can always use this. You can always undo, or you can remove a point by simply clicking it and removing it. So don't worry about it. If you might put a point that is out of place, you can always remove that point later. Just keep going until you're done. Alright, so next we have 500. Then we have 0. And now we're going to start going negative. So we're going negative 500. So we're basically going under the water now. Now notice that this sketch doesn't have a line for that, but that's fine. I'm just going to kind of make it up. And feel free to kind of just make up some additional contours, especially in areas that you may not know. So now I'm going to go negative 1000. And I'm going to imagine that this kind of drops off much steeper. So notice that this is going to be much closer. And let's just do negative 1500. Alright, and let's do a last one here of negative 2000. Now, important that this last point here needs to close the circular loop, and notice that you don't have to be clicking exactly on the circle. It doesn't really matter, the circle is just a guide. Alright, so that is basically our contour, and once you're done, you're going to choose OK. Alright, now if we use the 3D tool, which is located up here, you will notice that you're able to just kind of orbit and look on this in 3D. If I kind of angle this sideways, you can kind of see where it slopes down. We can now change our mode here, so let's change it from hidden line and let's put it to shaded. So you see we can get a better view of our building there, of our terrain, and we can see it, the slope that we intended it to have right here. Now that we have our terrain, what we need to do is now to merge our foundation with this terrain. Now to do that, we need to insert our foundation model that we had, which is this file here, and we need to insert this Revit file into this terrain file. Now when we insert it, what we're going to do is to create a link, and when we have that link, we can continue to edit our model and it will automatically update on our site. Now in order to do that, in our terrain file, we need to head over to insert, because we are indeed inserting one Revit file into another. So we head over to insert, and then we need to tell Revit what it is that we want to insert, and in this case we want to link one Revit file to another. So we're going to click link right there, and it's going to bring up where that file is. So in this case, that's my file there, and I'm going to choose open. Now once you choose open, Revit will place the file based on wherever it was placed in the source Revit drawing. Now when you hover over the file, notice that you get this little box, and when you click on it, you see all of these highlighted here. Now what these are actually levels, and these are the levels that I actually set within that Revit file. And the beauty about this is that when you link these Revit files, it will come over with all of those levels. Now notice I'm not able to edit this file. I'm not able to go in and edit any of these things because it is a linked file. So I would have to open this file in another Revit document in order to edit it, and then once I save it, it will update in this file. In this particular file though, what we want to do is just to position our model. So what I do is I go to a top view there, and first thing I might want to do is to kind of put our building model in the center of our terrain. So in order to do that, I'm going to click there, and I'm going to use the move tool, which is located here, and I'm going to click and I'm going to say let's move that model right here. Now the next thing I want to do is go to a side view to determine the height of this model above the ground and where it falls in terms of the water. So I'm going to go here, and I'm going to go back to my move tool, and I'm going to just click down here, and I'm going to just eyeball it to kind of push it up. Maybe that's too high, so I'm going to go MV, which is a shortcut for move, and carry it down just a bit. Let's go back to 3D view now, and I think that is looking like how we would want it to look. As a matter of fact, what I could actually do is I could go back to my site view here, and I see that my intention was to have the model come over just a little bit more, so I'm going to actually match that up with my sketch. I'll go back to my 3D view, and I just do a side view to make sure that it is actually above the ground. So I'm going to go to move, and let's move that up just a bit, maybe just a bit more. Yeah, and I think that's good. I think that's good now. Now one more thing that we want to do now is to add our water. And in order to add our water, we're just going to put a solid to represent the water. And whenever we go to render our model, we will just change the material of that solid to a water material. So the concept is that we want to draw a solid pretty much like about right there, and yeah, that will be our water. Now in order to do that, we're going to have to go to model in place, so we probably would be best to go to a plan view, and then we're going to go to the architecture tab, and under component we're going to go to model in place, And we're going to choose a category for this model. In this case, I think I'll put it on the site. And I'll call it water. Then I need to determine what type of model. How will I go about building the model? So in this case, it's just going to be a simple extrusion. So I'm going to choose extrude. And to create this extrusion, what I'm going to do is use a circle tool, and I'm just going to kind of mimic that circle. And then I'm going to estimate that, okay, my water would probably maybe come up about that high. So maybe something like that. And then what I'll do is I will use the slice tool here, and I will just make a slice on our circle there. Just escape, and I'll just delete that. Then I'll use the trim extend tool to just kind of drawing up this like that. So now I basically have a solid like this. I need to determine when the extrusion starts and when it ends. In this case, it's going below the ground, so I might go minus. I believe our lowest point was about 1,500, so let's go minus 2,000 millimeters. And we're gonna check yes and finish. Head back to our 3D view, and that is basically our water. Now we might notice that it does go below the land here, but that doesn't matter. And as soon as we decide to decide on what our perspective view is, so
Sorry, could
if I should
care
change
about
this
that
to perspective.
a few seconds, please. Say that again.
Head back to our 3D view, and
Yeah.
that is basically our water. Now we might notice that it does go below the land here, but that doesn't matter. And as soon as we decide to decide on what our perspective view is, so if I should change this to perspective, then you see, because the land, we gave ourselves enough space with the terrain and we made it round, we can pretty much take any view, like about this maybe, and we should get a pretty nice view with some backgrounds for our rendering. So that is the conclusion and how we create a terrain for our model. Okay guys, so that is pretty much it. So as I was saying, that it wasn't very long. You can definitely do that in a couple minutes, right? And if you right, so let's see. Here we go. All right, so at the end of the day, you should end up with something kind of like this. And the terrain might vary depending. And then we're going to continue. Remember that this file here that I have is really another Revit file. So we're going to continue working on this Revit file to build it up. And we'll come back to this file that we will use for our terrain. All right. Now you can add trees and things like that when you get to the 3D program. You don't have to add those things in Revit. Most people add, for example, people or maybe some outdoor chairs or things like that. Normally they add those things from Lumion or Twinmotion. All right, guys. So I don't think you have to worry about those kind of stuff in Revit. Now, all you're going to do with this file is that you're going to save it. And you're going to snap a picture and submit it as within the checkpoint tool.
Yes, sir.
All right. All right. So that is basically, yeah, is there a question?
No, sir. I was saying yes, sir.
All right. So that is basically our class for today. Remember that we also need the other part of this, which is to build your foundation. This you can complete for next week, but our class activity for today only involves doing the terrain. When you go to the submission, see if I can bring that up here. There we go. You might notice that the submission for the terrain is for the terrain only. So you submit an image and then you submit the working file. And the submission for the 3D foundation on the terrain. Because remember that by the time you reach here, you would have already done the terrain today in class. So for that now, you're going to submit the screenshot of the terrain, of the foundation on the terrain. And then the working file for that foundation. All right.
Understand, sir.
All right, cool. All right. I wish you guys luck. I'll be looking forward to marking those. And then the main course of this meal, so to speak, is going to be the checkpoint 3, right? Which is going to be building up the model, right? Now, there are some tutorials here on how to do that. So you can just follow these tutorials. This is going to take the most amount of work, I believe, because in this, we're going to build the wall framing, then we're going to build the openings and then the doors. All right. Now, while we're doing this, as I said, during the classes, we're going to have class activities throughout. And then remember to check the course timeline. So we can see here that checkpoint 3 pretty much going to start next week. Notice there's an overlap between checkpoint 2 and 3. Checkpoint 3 has the highest weighting and it also has the longest time. So there's a high possibility that while checkpoint 3 is happening, we're going to be having the class presentations as well, as that is due on October 23rd. All right, so pretty much the end of next month will be for checkpoint 3. And pretty much that will be your building. All right. Checkpoint 4 will be generating the rendered images, and checkpoint 5 will be the animation. So when we get to checkpoint 4 and 5, we're going to have additional class activities with using things like Lumion or maybe Enscape in class. And you guys are going to pick whichever one you want to use. All right.
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir.
Okay. Remember that you can check your grades here. You go to check grades and you will see them populate. Just keep scrolling right to see them populate. It's still ongoing, so just averagely check it. I normally mark every week. So for example, by the end of this week, we'll see everything that was due. And you will also see the class activities as well. All right.
So we'll find the recordings of the class.
Okay. So remember the recordings you find back on the main page. When you go to student home, you head over to class recordings.
Okay, so yeah.
Right. And then you go to 3D modeling, and you go to the current semester. And there you go. So this class I will post, which I guess will be checkpoint 2 tutorial. All right. Remember that some of the resources are in the class and some of the resources are on the handout itself. All right. So don't forget that the handout has the links to helping you to complete some of these tasks. All right, guys. So don't forget that and try to use up all of these resources that you have. I mean, just like 2 years ago, most of these resources, especially online resources and custom-made tutorials, were not a thing. So please try and use these to your advantage. All right.
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right, guys. So take care, and I will see you on Thursday for the lecture session. Please pass this message on for those who have class on Wednesday, that they are basically to just watch this class recording, complete the class exercise, and just hand that in tomorrow on Wednesday when they would have had their session. Okay, so please, class rep or anybody, just please pass that news on. Okay. All right. All right, guys. So I guess this is it. I will see you again on Thursday.
Yes, sir.
Okay,
Thank
sir.
you.
See you.